All right, so it seems that we're live. So welcome everyone to this first session of the Ubuntu Scopes workshops. I am David Planella from the Ubuntu community team, and today I'm going to talk about setting up your development environment for writing scopes. A few words about the workshops this afternoon, or wherever you are in the world, whichever time it is. We're gonna have today we're kicking off with this workshop to get you kick-started. Then secondly, we will have another one where you'll actually get to write your scope. You'll get to ask all of your questions on how to write a scope with David Planella, and then we'll have a third one today about adding location capabilities to your scope, so that you can customize the results depending on where the user is. Also, if you guys can see me on the on Ubuntu on Air, it'd be great if someone could confirm that the sound comes all right. Let me just check. There's just a bit of a tradition in all Hangouts on Air that we do on Ubuntu. We have to make sure that we're just talking to ourselves, but looking that the feed is actually working and people can view us. All right, okay, cool. So it seems Alkit on IRC is confirming Liart as well. So thanks a lot for confirming that. Before I start, I've got some content prepared. I've got some demos for hands-on demos. I've got a few slides as well. I promise it won't be many. It's just 4 of them actually, and I'll be showing you how I use the SDK to set it up for scope writing. Feel free to ask your questions at any time. I'll reserve in any case time for questions at the end. But feel free to interrupt me as well during the session. If you could prepend your questions with capital letters question and then colon, and then it will make it easier for me to see and don't miss any of the questions. So I think that's pretty much it. Also, I'll be focusing on the on setting up the environment. So questions that you might have that are particular to scopes development, probably the next presenter will be better to it will be better to ask the next presenter. David Planella will be running a hands-on session on writing scopes. All right, so now that we've clarified the logistics, let me just start with a couple of slides, and I'll show you a bit of the Ubuntu SDK as well. So let me just find this for you first. Okay. So just bear with me 1 second. And I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you should see some nice slide presentation in there. So I'm going to start with the content. Essentially, I want to talk about scope developer tools today. How to set up your environment to start writing scopes. A few words about how you can create scopes. What you'll be using is the Ubuntu SDK IDE. That's Qt Creator, and that and a device or an emulator is pretty much all that you need. With the IDE, you will use the same familiar interface that you use for applications and HTML apps. So it's exactly the same thing. You don't need anything special regarding scope development. Also, as with the rest of content types, apps, HTML5, and in this case scopes, Qt Creator and the Ubuntu SDK makes it easy to start writing a scope, so that you don't have to start from scratch. We've got a set of scopes templates that cover different different areas of development that you can use to get started. Also with the SDK, what you can do is to deploy to all devices, meaning that from that same place you can deploy your scope to the emulator, to an actual device, be it a tablet, be it a phone, and then also to the you can run it on the desktop as well. You can deploy it to the desktop. Also, what's important as well from the developer side of things is that from the IDE you can do the full scope lifecycle management. It's related to what I was mentioning earlier on deploying all devices to all devices. So from there, from the SDK, you can just develop your scope, debug it as well. You can package it quite seamlessly, which is quite cool, and then you can actually deploy that package and install it. In addition to that, we've got something called the Scopes Layout tool, which is only available on Ubuntu 14 or 14.10 or later. The Scopes Layout tool, we'll see it later on in more detail, is a rapid application development tool that enables developers to run their scopes, run the layout of their scopes on the desktop really quickly, and also it makes it easier to change the layout of the scopes, to change the presentation without having to change any lines of code, which is pretty cool. All right, and for the self pointing there, you can ignore it because it is something that I've left over from the next slide. All right. And just to finish with this set of slides. Just a quick overview of the scope development lifecycle. So essentially, the way it works is that you get started with a scope template that you load from the Ubuntu SDK. You modify it to your heart's content and write your own code. You then optionally can prototype it with the scopes tool. I mean, this is not a step that needs to be done, but it's something that's the scopes tool is something that's available to you if you need it. But I recommend trying it. And then you can deploy to a device or emulator. Again, quite seamlessly. Emulators are also considered as devices, virtual devices, as opposed to physical devices, but they are treated in exactly the same way in the SDK. Then you can optionally debug your scope, and then finally, when you're happy with it, you'll be able to submit it to the store, and that's pretty much it. It is quite similar, as you see, to the apps development cycle. We've made it a point to make it a homogeneous experience when you're developing different types of content. All right. So before we start onto development kits, let me just show you a few things so that you don't get bored by too many slides. So, all right, let me check on here, see if there are any questions. Yes, there's actually one question that I can start answering. Dragonbite is asking, are the slides going to be available afterwards? Yes, very much so. I'll post them somewhere, probably on SlideShare, or I've got some other slides, and also the video of this recording is going to be available on the Ubuntu On Air YouTube account, so you can watch it afterwards. Dragonbite is also mentioning optional debug. He or she wouldn't think debugging would be an option. Well, it depends. It depends on your workflow as a developer. The reason I mentioned it's optional is simply because it is a tool that's available for you, and you can choose whether you want to use it or not. All right, so let me get started with the Ubuntu SDK, and I'll show you a couple of things about it. So let me see if I can share my screen. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay. All right. I think you should be able to see the right screen right now. And all right, so what I've done is just let me just show you here. I've started the Ubuntu SDK just simply by launching it from the dash, and what you're seeing here is again the Ubuntu SDK. You've got different different options here. Mostly when you'll be developing, you'll be looking at edit mode. So what I'm trying to show you right now is what we've been talking about earlier on. It's about the templates and the integrated development environment. So when you start the SDK and then you go to projects to file new project, then you're presented with a choice of different templates. The ones that we'll be looking at today are the Unity Scope templates. And from here, you'll be able to just create a new template for creating a scope, modifying it. Also, the thing that I'm just going to cancel it, and I'll show you. I'm going to show it to you in more detail when we do the demo. I just wanted to give you an overview of what we're doing here. Another thing that we've been talking about are devices. So if you go to the devices tab on the Qt Creator on the SDK IDE, you'll see that I've got two devices set up. One is the Nexus 4, which is the phone, the physical phone that I've got right now attached to the SDK, to my computer essentially. And then I've got an emulator that I created. So these are the two devices that I've got in here. When you plug in a phone, the SDK should offer you to create a new device for it. And for emulators, you should be able to create them from here. So I'm just going to cancel this because emulators take a bit to create. They are generated dynamically, and it essentially installs an Ubuntu distribution inside well, somewhere in the file system for the emulator to run. Okay. Another thing that we'll be looking at in a minute are kits. I've got a couple of slides that I want to show you, and then we can jump onto the more hands-on side of kits. Okay, so let me see if I can just share some more slides. All right. So we've been talking about the capabilities of the SDK so far, and what you can do with scopes and what the workflow is for scopes. One thing that's also quite important for scopes and to understand how you'll be deploying and developing your scopes are development kits. So let me just start with this. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay, so a few words about development kits. All right, so kits are a concept that encompasses a couple of things. I think the most important thing to know is that kits are a bunch of settings for building and running apps. The reason why we've got kits is because kits enable app developers to easily do cross-platform development, meaning that you can develop your app on your PC running on i386 or AMD64 architectures, but on the phone, ultimately, it's most probably going to be ARM-HF, meaning another architecture. So there must be a way in which you can compile your applications if you need to do so. In a foreign architecture before deploying it onto the phone or any device. So essentially, that's what kits allow you to do. They contain a group of settings that define an environment. In this case, compiler, device, debugger. etc. When you're running a project, when you're creating a scope, you can easily jump between kits, so you can define different ones, so that you can, for example, develop just once and then run on the desktop, on a device, or on the emulator while you're building your app. So you can, as I say, you can switch them on and off, and you can also change between them very easily. Also, each kit can have different run configurations. So as an example, you can have a normal run configuration, or you can have a debug configuration. So whenever you're running your scope, you should be able then to choose between kits. And just to wrap up this one, so in a nutshell, kits are the combination of a toolchain, meaning a compiler, a build environment, and then a device, be it a physical device, for example, a phone or a tablet, or a virtual device such as the emulator. What I tend to do with my kits is I tend to name them as the same name as the device, so that I know at a glance what I'll be running on. All right, so just a quick deep dive inside the elements of each kit. So most importantly, the device, which can be a physical device, I'll say a phone or a tablet, the desktop, or the emulator, which in this case would be a virtual device. Then secondly, the toolchain, which comprises the build, chroot, compiler, and other toolchain options. I think the most important one is probably the chroot. Chroot is something that you create on your build system, which is isolated from the rest. It essentially is a separate, complete Ubuntu system, or rather, I'd say minimal for building and running system that has the architecture matching the device that you're running. So, for example, for my phone, I would create a chroot for ARM-HF. So I would compile for ARM-HF inside that chroot, and then I would package also my the contents of that build inside that chroot. Essentially, the workflow is that you create a chroot on the IDE, or if you want on the command line. I recommend to use the IDE because it makes it a lot easier to set up. And then you create an emulator that for that chroot, and then subsequently you would create a kit from the devices tab, and you would edit it if necessary. That would encompass the device and the chroot. And then finally, when you open a project, you can choose this kit to use it for the build. And finally, then just build, run, and profit. That's pretty much it. Okay, so let me just stop sharing, and actually we'll start now with the actual demo. What we'll see is how to create a scope, opening a scope project, building a scope, running a scope, and we'll see a bit more about kits in practice as well. So without further ado, let me just stop screen sharing. Just close the slides, and let me check if there are any questions. Okay, so there's a question from Liard S. How much does an emulator take to create? I tried it some days ago and it killed it after 20 minutes. All right, so it depends on your system actually. What I would recommend is to create an emulator that uses the same architecture as your desktop. In this way, it will be running on the same architecture rather than on a foreign one, and it will be a lot quicker. What I would recommend as well is that while you're creating your emulator, that you have make sure that you have things that are consuming lots of RAM closed, so that there's more RAM available to the emulator when creating it. In my case, it can take up to 5 minutes to create. In slower systems, it might take longer, but once it's created, it's relatively quick to run. So actually, let me just share the screen, and I'll show you this in a minute. Okay, so let me find the window. Okay, so as I said before, if you go to devices, and then you create an emulator, I'll just give it just my emu as the name. Just make sure that the architecture is set to i386, meaning that it will be running on the same architecture as my PC or your PC, and not ARMHF. ARMHF, it's just in case you want to run it with exactly the same architecture as the phone. Unless you know that you need it and you really want it, I wouldn't recommend using it, using ARMHF. So stick to i386. In here, I'd recommend using dvel. That's the image channel where the emulator will be created from. Image channels are essentially the place where the Ubuntu Touch images will be fetched from. So when you create an emulator, what you will do is just fetch the same image that we use to build the phones, and then install it on your desktop to run inside the emulator. For the dvel one is the current development branch, and it's the most stable of the two dvel branches. Dvel proposes something that's created that creates images daily. But dvel has got more QA in place, so that only images that have passed a certain quality criteria are put in there. So I would recommend using dvel. So essentially, just go with the defaults. I'll press cancel now because creating an emulator, running Hangout on air is something that's well, pretty much hugs down any computer. All right. Yes, that's something that I should mention as well. As I said before on the slides, so for developing scopes, you can do it from Ubuntu 14.04 or later. However, if you want to use the Unity Scopes tool to run your scopes from the desktop, that's only supported on Ubuntu 14.10. So if you want to use the full capabilities of scope development, you should move to 14.10, which was released actually a few days ago, or a couple of weeks ago actually. On Ubuntu 14.04, you'll be able to develop scopes and run them on the device or on the emulator. Just you won't be able to run them on the desktop. All right, so let's start with creating our first scope, shall we? Let me just check if we're still sharing the screen. Yes, we are. So the first thing that we will do is I'll just go and go to File, New File of Project, and as I said before, we will choose one of the templates that we've got already in place. So I'm going to choose the Unity Scope one. When I go in there, I can just give a name to my scope. For the example purposes, I'll just leave it as it is. You can call it my scope or whatever you like. Then a couple of things worth mentioning. The domain is something that will be uniquely tied to the apps and scopes that you develop, and that will be tied to your account when you publish them. Generally, you can just use the default com.ubuntu.developer. and then your nickname or username or whatever. In my case, it's DPM, and then maintainer is simply my email address. Scope name in this case, you can go with the default. And then confinement type is about what type of content your scope will be able to access. Scopes can access local content, meaning that they won't be able to access the net or access the network. This is a bit of an either or. It's simply because of privacy reasons. So, for example, if I choose a scope with network access right now, I won't be able to use any local user data. Again, for isolation and privacy reasons. Right now on the SDK, we've only got scope with network access as an option. We will have a scope with local access coming up, but for now, I think the most interesting ones that you guys can create for the scope showdown are scopes that access content from the net. Then one thing that's quite important as well, the template type. We've got 4 different types of templates to cater for different ways of accessing APIs and different ways of parsing content from third-party APIs. Now, what I would recommend is to go with the default, and the default for me is using the Qt scope, the 2 types of Qt scopes. Qt scopes essentially use the Qt APIs, so you've got you're very, very well covered for whichever thing you want to do. So, for example, for accessing the network or for parsing different types of files, you won't be on your own. You won't have to use C++ standard lib APIs. You can use a higher level set of APIs from the Qt project. So these are the ones that I would recommend. There's the only difference between them is in the type of APIs that they use to parse content. So many third-party online services provide results as JSON. So in this case, I would choose the Qt scope using HTTP and JSON API because it's got some sample code already or boilerplate code that will help you to parse JSON. If the content that I'm getting for the third-party service is XML, then I would go for the second one, Qt scope using HTTP plus XML. Then thirdly, if you decide not to use Qt APIs at all, and you are hardcore C++ developer who just wants to use standard lib and such things, you can then use the pure C++ scope. In this case, we've only got the JSON API parsing part as an example. Probably if you're a hardcore C++ developer and you choose this template, you won't need much help in figuring out how to parse XML. Finally, if you want to start completely from scratch, we've got an empty scope template as well. With that one, you don't have any boilerplate code other than the most essential files that define a scope project. And this is for those who are already familiar with scopes, who have created like lots of scopes, and rather than using boilerplate code, they just go ahead and write their own. All right, so that's it for the template. So I'm going to choose the one for JSON API and I'm going to click next. And I've got several different kits in here, and what I'm going to do is to have the desktop kit, the emulator kit, and the phone kit. This one is one that was created for me, and I won't be using it for now. So this means I will be able to run my scope on the desktop, run it on the emulator, and run it on the phone. Okay, so if I click next, we can skip that. It's about adding your scope to version control. I mean, of course, I would recommend any project to be added to version control, but not for the purposes of this workshop. So let me go to finish. And right now, what we've done is we've just created a scope. What you see in here are all of the files that that are important for creating scope. Just quickly, I'll just go through some of the most important files that you should know about, and some of the most important places. So the source folder is what contains your actual code from the scope. What's interesting about scopes is that in the boilerplate template, there's a separation already between the code that's essentially the scope. These are the 3 files in here, and then the client code to access the APIs and network. I wouldn't go through the sources. I think that's more material for the next workshop. I just want to show you the locations essentially. So most of the things that you'll be changing are going to be on this folder, on the source folder, where you'll be modifying either the client code or the scope per se code. Another thing that's another file that's interesting as well is the ini file for the scope. That's under the data directory. That's something that the scopes registry, which is the server on the phone that runs scopes, uses to launch your scope. With this, in this ini file, you define some basic scope metadata, such as the name, the description, you tell it the location of your logo, and so on. Also, you can add some customization options in here. If you want to learn more about customization, just go to developer.ubuntu.com/scopes/tutorials, and there you'll find a tutorial on how to customize your scope. 2 other important files for scope in your scopes environment are the manifest and the AppArmor file. The manifest gets opened in the, let me just close this. When you click on the manifest, it's opened in the special manifest editor, but if you want, you can also open it with a plain text editor. So you can see it's, if you're familiar with JSON, it's just simply a JSON file. Just gonna open it again with the manifest editor. And the manifest is quite important to define how your app will be packaged. So when you publish a scope and you package it as a click app, which is as a click package rather, which is the format that Ubuntu uses to package up scopes, apps, and HTML5 apps and submit them to the store, then the manifest will be where you'll define all of these details. Again, the name is the same as what I was mentioning when you created the scope on the template. It's your unique ID, including the name of the scope. In this case, it's untitled 21, which is just the default that I took. Also, the title is the name of the scope, description, maintainer, that's myself, my email, the version, and then the framework is a set of APIs that this scope is targeted against. Right now, the stable Ubuntu version is 14.10, so you would be choosing a 14.10 framework. Hooks are ways in which to specify different types of functionalities for scopes. For the most simple scopes, you won't have to worry about hooks, so I won't go into detail in here. And finally, the AppArmor profile is what defines what your scope will be able to access, meaning apps and scopes for Ubuntu have got a very strict security policy in which they are isolated. Every app or every scope that's installed is isolated from the rest of the system. So if it needs to access any part of the system, it needs to be specified as a security policy. And these security policies are, again, very, very restricted in what you can do. For scopes, as I created a networking scope, what I will do is just add networking. The networking security policy. And if I click it in here, I get some description. It's essentially an AppArmor profile. So if you want to read more about AppArmor and how it works, there's quite a lot of literature on the internet already. So I'm just going to add networking. All right. And I think we're pretty much done in terms of defining the scope and seeing the important files of the scope. What we will do now is to run it. And I will be using the scopes sorry, the scopes tool on the desktop. Before I do that, a quick word about kits. So if I click here down on the left bottom left-hand side corner of my screen, I've got all of the different kits that I've selected when I was prompted by the template choice. So I can switch between them. So for example, I'm running on desktop now. I can then switch to the emulator and then back to desktop. And then for every kit, we've got a run configuration. In this case, by default, we've got some scope unit tests. We don't want to run tests, but we want this to actually run my scope. So I'm just going to click here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to run the scope. The selection of the kit determines that it will run on the device. And when I click on play, on run, what it will do as well is at the same time, it will build the scope first, and then it will run it. So let's just bear with me while it's building this, and then we'll get it to run in a second. So you can see the progress in there. Nearly there. Okay, so it's finished building it now, and there you go. The Unity Scopes tool running the scope. Okay, so what can we say see in here? So the default scope template that is available on the SDK is already a fully functional scope. And what it does is it queries the openweathermap.org API to get some weather data. So what we see here is the actual scope in the same way as it would look on the device. And then on the right, we've got an extra panel that we can operate to modify the layout of the scope. So the first thing that we can do is to just use the scope as a normal user would do. So what we see in here is two categories of results for a search. The search has already been pre-populated, but I'm just going to send it again. So we get London. If the user sends London to the scope, then it will return two different set of categories of results. It will get the actual temperature as it is right now. And then on the second category of results, you'll get the 7-day forecast, which you can also expand to see more results. So that's exactly how the user would use this scope on the phone. Now, on the developer panel in here, which is something that wouldn't be shown to the user, it's something that's only shown on the desktop. What we should be able to do is to choose a category of results. As I said before, there's two categories available. One is the actual temperature, and the other one is the 7-day forecast. And what we can do is, without modifying any code at all, we can modify the looks of the scope, the actual layout. So what I'm going to do is, again, I've chosen a category, the main one, and then I'm going to override the category. And what I get here is the JSON schema, which we generally would define in the code, but in this case we can modify on the fly here. So what we see in this first part is the actual layout, and then here we see what is shown in each one of the results. So what I'm going to do is something very simple. Instead of having medium card size, I'm going to choose large. So let me just confirm this, and then as you see for this category, then we can modify the size of the results. So let me just get back to medium. and then confirm. And then another thing that we can do is to select the other category and then override that category as well. We can say vertical layout, and there you go. We've got a vertical grid right now. So as you see, I mean, I didn't modify any code at all. I could already very rapidly modify the full layout of the scope, which is something that's pretty cool. All right, so if you've got any questions so far, just let me know on IRC. As I said before, just prepare them with questions as I mentioned earlier on. There was a question earlier on about the SDK not having not having emulator or phone devices. This is simply because you probably didn't have a device connected when you started the SDK. Right now, what we've got on the SDK is a wizard that helps you on the first run to create all of you need to use kits. The reason I didn't create a full kit here is because it takes a while, and it talks down the computer while doing the Hangout, which is not optimal. What I'm going to do now is to run on the emulator, and you'll see how we can switch between devices. Okay, so let me choose the emulator as a kit. Then I'm going to choose to run the scope, and when I'm going to press the play button, and what this will do is to build the scope again. It won't build it at the same place as it built the desktop scope. It will build it in a separate environment for the emulator. Once it's finished building it, it will actually start the emulator, and it will run the scope on the emulator. So let's show the output in here, and as you see, right now it just fired up an emulator. Yes, to answer the question from Matteo on IRC, you have to create an emulator separately. The way you do it is, I'll show it in a minute once we finished with the emulator. But you can go to the devices tab in there, and then you've got an option to create an emulator. Okay, yeah, the emulator takes generally a while to get started. It seems that the emulator is already online. We still can't see the UI yet. But what you see in here is that Qt Creator built the scope. It packaged it up, and it installed it on the device. So let me just go past the unlock screen. The default password when you're asked on the emulator is simply 000. There you go. And then in a minute it should run the scope for you. Oh, actually, yeah, see, it finished. Let me try again then. So again, we're building the scope, which we're building the scope, which was already done. And there you go. You've got the scope running on the emulator. And as you see, it's pretty similar to what we saw on the Unity Scopes tool. So we've got an actual result in here with the current temperature, and I can give it another location. The keyboard is not. Oops. Sorry, I just killed the scope. All right, let me just restart it. Just close any running ones. Let me press run again. Let me choose the emulator, and it's installing it, and there you go. So yeah, I mean, you can choose the actual results. You can choose the forecast. You can show all of the results, and so on. So actually, you're running an actual scope on a virtual device. Okay. So that's pretty much it in terms of running scopes on different devices. I could probably just run it on the phone as well, which is pretty similar. Let me just do this while I explain a couple of other things. So if I want to run it on the phone, I need to have a phone connected, which I have. And then it builds it for the phone. Then I choose the run configuration. And when I press play, again, it's building the scope and it will install it on my device. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen so I can show what's actually running. So yeah, still building. Let me just stop sharing and let me see if I can show my phone. All right, it's launching it now. Installing it actually and launching it now. So yeah, sorry about the bad quality of the image, but yeah, what you probably can see here is the Ubuntu logo, and then you can see the weather icon in here. So if I click on here, I can see more details. But yeah, I mean, you can just barely see a scope running, but that's what I wanted to show. All right. Any questions so far? Okay, it seems everyone's good. A couple of other questions that I wanted to mention before I finish. Just a couple of details on scopes. So scopes are written in C++, and they are when you build a scope, the build system that we use, or rather that the SDK uses, is CMake. You can recognize it. You can recognize CMake on the list of files that are available on the template. So you'll see, for example, cmake lists.txt in some of the directories. These are the places where you put your build rules. They're pre-populated for you on the templates, but you can change them depending on how you're building your scope. Another interesting thing about scopes is how to open their projects. So we created one from scratch before, but what we also can do is to open a new or an existing scope. So what I'm going to do is just minimize this one, and I'm just going to open one. So what I will do is I'll open an existing scope, which is one of the tutorials that we've got available on the website. And what you will be doing when opening a scope is to open the cmake lists.txt file that's on top of the source tree. So let me just select this. Okay, great. And when you open a scope, you also be prompted for the kits that you'll be using. In this case, I had opened it before, so it was already defined. But yeah, you can choose which ones you've got. So in this case, I'll choose desktop again. And I've got SoundCloud already selected. Before I run this scope, another thing that I wanted to show you, we've seen the devices tab where you can create new emulators or attach your existing phones or tablets. Another tab that's interesting is projects. So on the projects tab, I can manage the kits that I've got. So for example, let me just remove the phone one, for example. And in this case, I wouldn't have any more phones, any more phone kits. If I want to, I can just add a new kit again. I can just re-add the phone one. And then in here, you can also choose which emulator which kit you're actually running. In this case, I'll stick to desktop. Yeah, let's just run it. I just wanted to show you a cool one that David Planella, the next presenter, built for his tutorial on developer.ubuntu.com. That's a scope to query SoundCloud. It's an online music service where people can submit music content, and then you can query it to get to that content. I'll just play around a bit with the Unity Scopes tool. So if I click on a result, I can see it in more detail, and then if I click on open, it would open it on the browser. So in this case, what we can do again is to select a category. There's only one, the default one, and let's make this carousel. Let's say vertical. So there you go. With just a couple of mouse clicks, we've changed completely how the layout, or what the layout looks like. That's the cool thing about the Unity Scopes tool. We can do a search as well. Let's. There you go. You get all of the results for the Ramones in there. Cool. All right. So any questions so far? Robert Troll is asking, where can we find the source for the default scopes on the phone? That's a good question. I don't remember myself the actual project. I can probably quickly find out. Just a second. So I'm not sure if there's any overall arching project for all of the scopes. I know where some of them are. So for example, let me just give you on IRC, let me just give you an example. Generally, they are on the they are all in Launchpad for a start. Generally, they are named as Unity-scope- and then the name of the particular scope. So there's also Unity. Unity scope click, Unity scope. I think there's also a SoundCloud scope, and so on. If you stick on IRC later on, I can probably give you a list of all of the ones that we've got. All right. So Liard S is asking, to clarify, the desktop device doesn't work on 1404. Exactly. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. And that's only for scopes, to be clear. The reason being is because Unity Scopes tool uses quite a lot of Unity 8 APIs, which are only available from 14.10 onwards. It would require quite a lot of effort to backport them, and that's why we've decided to just recommend for developing scopes using 14.10. However, as I've shown you, you can still develop scopes on 1404 using virtual or physical devices such as the emulator or a phone or a tablet running Ubuntu. All right. Okay. Since we've still got a few minutes, what I will show you as well is something that's a bit more of a deep dive, again, in the setup of Qt Creator. I just want to show you where these settings are in case you come across them or you need to change them. So let me just quickly share my screen. Okay. All right. Oops, sorry. Let me just do it again. Okay. All right. So we've seen the devices tab. We've seen the projects tab. Another thing that's interesting to know where it is for kids is kits themselves and chroots. So if I go to build and run and then kits, you will see all of the kits that I've got defined on my system, and I can manage them from here. I said before, I've set up kits so that they've got the same names as devices. Generally, by default, the kits are named when they're created automatically based on their architecture and the compiler. But I tend to just change the name to the device that I'm using so that it's easier for me to recognize them. It's up to you as the developer how you do it. I'm just going to remove this one because I don't need it. I'm happy with my 3 ones. Yeah, the desktop is the one that's running on my developer desktop. Then I've got the emulator, which has got an Ubuntu emulator on i386 architecture, and then I've got the phone one. So that's pretty much it in terms of kits. What's interesting to know is which chroot they are using. This is pre-populated for you by default automatically when you create a new kit. And then these chroots, which is where each project is built for each architecture, are managed here from the Ubuntu tab. They're called click build targets. And depending on which architecture you're building for, you'll have separate ones. So in my case, I've got chroot to build projects for the emulator that's running on i386, and one for building on ARM HF for actual devices. So that's pretty much it. You can update them from here. In this case, I don't need to update them much because they are already on a stable Ubuntu release. And if I click on maintain, I get a terminal where I can install new dependencies if I need to add them for building. But that's more advanced stuff. So let me just close this. Okay, so that covers pretty much everything that I wanted to show. Let me just see if there's any questions. Actually, we're running out of time, so I should probably wrap it up here. Okay, so I'd just like to say thank you for everyone who's been listening in, and for your questions. This will be recorded, so you'll be able to see it later on. And then I'll leave the space, or I'll leave the stage rather, for David Planella with his next tutorial or workshop on how to write your first scope. So thanks everyone, and until next time.